So tell me your version of a technical definition of blockchain.
A technical definition of blockchain is that it is a persistent, transparent, public, append-only ledger. So it is a system that you can add data to and not change previous data within it. It does this through a mechanism for creating consensus between scattered or distributed parties that do not need to trust each other, but just need to trust the mechanism by which their consensus is arrived at. In the case of blockchain, it relies on some form of challenge such that no one actor on the network is able to solve this challenge consistently more than everyone else on the network.
So it randomizes.
Yes, yeah, it randomizes the process and in theory ensures that no one can force the blockchain to accept a particular entry onto the ledger that others disagree with. One that relies on a mechanism for a peer-to-peer network that can maintain updates to the ledger and then verify those updates in such a way that it is impossible to defraud and impossible to alter after the fact.
And do you see it as defining a new discipline of kinds, or where are we going to see blockchain emerge in the real world first?
I mean, just so like as an example, one thing that I think about a lot in terms of possible blockchain applications is electricity. Right, the next generation of distributed smart grid technology, effectively.
Sure, and people are working on that
yes,
already.
Yeah, exactly. And it's this very fruitful area of research, and you can find yourself looking like 20 years out, right, where you have an enormous number of electric cars. You have all of these batteries. Like that's essentially a distributed peak load power grid, right? Like the cars are getting plugged in and unplugged at different times. If you have a mechanism that is able to automatically and autonomously be distributing power based on batteries that are scattered throughout the grid, that are being used for other purposes. Their owners don't even necessarily need to be aware. You begin to have something that looks like a much more viable society that still has a lot of electricity needs, but is able to base that much more on renewables, is able to make up the difference during peak load periods or during differences in weather, that is able to have power much closer to where it's needed rather than having to be distributed over great distances. Like, that's something that would be an enormously hard problem to solve. And it's not that the blockchain makes it easy, but it makes it possible.
A lot of people are seeing blockchain in the news and maybe seeing a lot of sort of initial coin offerings, this sort of monetization opportunity around blockchain, and are getting very excited about it. Now, some of that excitement is real and should be encouraged, but some of it is also hype. How do you feel about the hype cycle around blockchain today?
I'm glad you mentioned initial coin offerings because for me those really exemplify the sort of the problem that we're having at this exact moment. They are an idea with enormous potential significance down the road. However, the promise of the initial coin offering has been kind of hijacked into this string of like basically pump and dump scams or sort of desperate gold rush schemes. The faster that we can shift from this fantasy that it is going to make you rich in a sort of 1920s tulip bubble kind of way, is the sooner that we can get into people, honestly, and I mean this like with all the hope in the world, people being disappointed in blockchains. Like, oh, I didn't get rich. It's just being used now to make it easier to transact goods and services safely across borders. This isn't exciting at all. And then we'll see that like become part of the everyday infrastructure of the world in a way that I think will be very significant. But I think it is now almost every aspect of it that's connected with the concept of money is wildly overhyped.
Well, and it also creates a problem, which is people get a lot of excitement around it, and then they're waiting for the world to change, right? Where is this technology? Why haven't I seen anything change yet? And it's because we've had a lot of PR, a lot of proof of concept, but truthfully, this is more like a science, right? It will develop, it will take 5 years, it will take 10 years. That kind of time is necessary. One of the areas that brought me to supply chain research is the fact that we're not just going to see blockchain emerge, we're going to see artificial intelligence continue to evolve. We're going to see connected devices and this sort of growing Internet of Things, machinery that can do a lot more and have a wallet and transact on their own. And so I actually think a lot of where blockchain and other technologies are headed is this interesting synergy that will help us elevate the kinds of institutions we've used in the past and cobbled together to create that identifiable, verifiable trust.
Yes, and one of the most interesting ideas to me that came out of the currency side of the blockchain project was the notion around like coloring coins, right? Assign properties to a particular coin, and in particular to assign those properties in ways that would allow you to do things like bring in the graph of previous transactions.
Right.
You know, there's sort of an obvious application for this, which is something that would look a little bit like an extreme version of like a boycott, divestment, and sanctions kind of approach, right? A model where it's sort of like, I will not touch money. My wallet will automatically not touch money that has been exchanged with the following, as a sort of very extreme way of cutting those things out. But there's also ways in which I think that could be applied to clearing out the entire logistics process of many kinds of bad actors. But trying to make a supply chain better in some ways relies a lot on whose version of better that is, and exactly kind of what gets qualified, but also how that is quantified within, say, some kind of like smart contract system. There's multiple ways that I could see this backfiring, and one is the ways in which that is implemented, for example, leaving certain kinds of bad behavior untouched or unanalyzed, or one that feels even more dire to me in some ways, is creating an extremely inflexible, because human contracts, legal contracts, are actually very flexible. Like there's a lot of kind of room to move and renegotiate. But we already have real world versions of some of these nightmare scenarios, right? Where like your kid has a medical emergency and you can't unlock your car because you're 2 days behind on payments for it. And so the car system will no longer respond to the app mechanism that you're supposed to be able to use to drive it.
So a barrier being sort of a rigidity in those structures that maybe don't accommodate real life scenarios very well.
As you and I have been talking, one of the things that keeps coming up is that we tend to hold novel technologies to an unrealistically high standard in terms of what they are supposed to deliver, rather than comparing them to actually existing systems where we can begin to see the possibility that even like a slight incremental improvement would still be an enormous gain.
The system we have today is also broken, right? And that it's hard to compare it to some perfect future, just like we compare autonomous vehicles to this very high standard. Because machines are doing it, it should be perfect, right? There should be 0 car deaths. When you say, well, there's hundreds of thousands, millions of car deaths on the road due to human error today, I think we're in a similar place. We're going to see problems with this technology, and we are going to need to develop multiple kinds of standards that also have some flexibility. But it's going to also be a version, a system that allows us to fix some of the things that are broken today. Blockchain may sound complicated, but at its core, it's just another tool for humans and eventually robots and other kinds of identities to trade at scale and make that trade more decentralized. And it's part of our future, so it's important that people have these kinds of conversations and start to learn about it.